Good afternoon. This is Lunchtime News. It is the 30th day of the 5th month of 2023, and we have a comprehensive bulletin lined up. This Lunchtime News, and our sign language interpreter is Brian Muraro. My name is Jackie Wambiru, and to kick us off, we shall be crossing over to Del Monte, where the protracted land tussle between Del Monte Kenya Limited and a section of Kiambu and Murang'a residents has escalated after the residents demanded allocation of some 7,400 acres. The residents are members of Kandara Residents Association who have been pursuing allocation of part of the land that is occupied by the multinational fruit juice processor.
Kandara Residents Association represents over 5,000 squatters laying claim to part of land inhabited by Del Monte.
Tumefanya hii kesi ya samba Del Monte miaka mingi sasa, sijui miaka zaidi ya 5. Na haki yetu tunaomba haki yetu. Tukienda kwa koti tunamaliziwa hii mambo yote, tukaambiwa samba yetu tukatimisiwa. Kwa bunge tukaenda tukapewa hiyo samba yetu.
Sasa tumeshindwa, samba letu kama Kandara Resident 70% iko wapi?
The aggrieved residents raised concerns over delays in implementing recommendations by the Parliamentary Lands Committee in the previous government that recommended that they should be settled on the land.
Na wakati tulipoenda kotini, tukaenda tukapata ya kwamba tumefaulu kupata shamba, tukaenda katika koti la Murang'a pia wakapitisha, na pia mbunge tumeenda na tukapitishiwa. Tungeomba bunge ambayo inayoendelea kwa wakati huu, ili haki zetu tuweze kuona ya kwamba zinatimizwa.
Wale wako serikalini watuhakikishie watupatie shamba letu la Del Monte, kwa kuwa tumeteseka sana.
The residents are also up in arms against the National Land Commission for failing to heed to its Gazette notice that ordered allocation of the land to the residents and the respective county governments at a ratio of 70-30. For Lunchtime News, I am Teresa Mutai.
In other news, a section of teachers in Busia County has threatened to quit their jobs if the controversial Finance Bill 2023-2024 is passed into law without deleting all contentious sections. Led by Busia County Kenya Union Post-Primary Education Teachers Secretary Mofati Okisai, the teachers say they are already feeling burdened by the cost of living.
Hiyo sisi tunaomba ya kwamba we have already ICU pay slips. Our pay slips are in ICU. Tafadhali sikiza maoni ya hao walimu. Assuming a situation whereby a teacher is supposed to occupy a house of 3 million. The employer contributes 2,500. The employee contributes 2,500. In total, that will be 5,000. When you divide 5,000, 3 million by 5,000, it will total to 600 months. 600 months is equivalent to 50 years. The majority of the teachers standing here in, wengi wao ni 40 years. 40 years ongeza 50 years, watakuwa wamezeeka kabla hawajapata manyumba.
Fanya kazi, tumegharamia hiyo nyumba na tuhitaji nyumba ingine kutoka kwa serikali. Wacha tuongeze mshahara, ndio sasa president afikirie mambo ya kukata hiyo mambo ya finance bill ya housing.
On education matters, education stakeholders now want digital literacy skills to be imparted to learners for efficient implementation of the competence-based curriculum. Speaking at Kanga Primary School in Migori County, former Chief Administrative Secretary David Osiani said the current system of education can only be beneficial to both learners and teachers if they have basic computer skills. Osiani added that the acquisition of digital skills at a tender age exposes learners to technical courses which are in demand in the job market.
we hope that this initiative started by Close the Gap in conjunction with Crestwood Marketing and Communications will edify our children, equip them with the digital skills, enable them to be useful in the society, evoke interest in them to get into things like coding at some point. And we look forward to this being very productive for the school, and maybe at some later date expanding the capacity, who knows, expanding the capacity so that it can benefit much more people.
Kenya has been, in my opinion, and I'm really saying it in very much objectivity from having benchmarked it with other countries, you are leading the way. You are using technology in all layers of society.
It's been a big challenge. For example, when you really want to get information or the exam from Kenya NEC Examination Council, they post in our portal, their portal, and then we download, we print. It has been very expensive for us to maintain, very expensive. But with this one around, I think we are going to ease in work.
And now we cross over to County Hall, where Kamau Thuge, the nominee for the governor of the central bank, is appearing before the vetting committee, and he is among 6 candidates shortlisted by the Public Service Commission. Let's listen in.
I think it did not have a good impact on the financial system, and if you actually look at credit to the private sector since that law was implemented, credit to the private sector has not actually been growing. It's been growing by, I think, maybe on average until last year, on average maybe 6%. I would imagine over from 2016 to early 2022. Credit to the private sector could not have, on average, increased by 7%. We've seen now a recovery in credit to the private sector since early last year, and I think even the latest number shows that now credit is actually increasing in double-digit levels. But just to go back to the issue of that, the 4%. Because it actually distorted even monetary policy quite significantly, because in fact it almost inverted the way monetary policy works, because the banks could not lend because the rates were too low. And so when the central bank tries to now raise interest rates to rein in on credit, the banks were now willing to even provide more credit. So it almost went in the reverse way, and I think removing it was actually the right approach. And we've seen now that credit to the private sector is recovering. And perhaps if maybe while I'm still on this, since I don't know whether the matter will come up again, I think one of the areas, Chairman, that I would like to also focus on, should I become the governor of the central bank, is that I really do feel that credit to the private sector could have grown by more than it has. And I feel that a lot of Kenyans have complained in the past that yes, the economy is growing, but they don't feel that there is money on the ground. And my take on it is that it's true that the economy has grown partly because of the infrastructure that has been built using borrowed loans, and so a lot of the money actually go back to where the borrowing is coming from, and so we don't feel that money is circulating. But if also credit to the private sector from the banking system is contracting, I think that's where now the Kenyans feel that, oh, the economy is growing, but there's no money. In fact, Chair, if you look at from the end of 2015, credit to the private sector in relation to GDP was something like 33%. Right now it's 24%. Yeah, which means had we maintained credit to the private sector,
Well, Thuge is the senior advisor and head of fiscal affairs and budget policy at a State House. Remember, he was nominated by President William Ruto following the imminent retirement of Patrick Njoroge, whose 2 terms end next month. And if approved by the National Assembly, Thuge becomes Kenya's 10th CBK governor. Now, in other news, elected leaders from Kajiado County have been urged to shun divisive politics and instead foster unity in the region. Kajiado Governor Joseph Lenku says party politics are derailing the county from the development agenda 8 months after elections. Lenku, who was speaking in Kajiado Central, urged leaders from both divides to bury the political hatchet and focus on solving the myriad of challenges facing Kajiado residents.
Jamani wanasiasa, tumeipatia siasa kipaumbele sana. Hiyo kuiweka siasa mbele inaumiza maendeleo. Sasa mambo ya vyama, kila mtu amejulikana amechaguliwa chama gani. Hizo vyama zetu tunaziheshimu, lakini wakati tuko ni wakati wa kufanya kazi kwa mwananchi. Kwa hivyo kama kaunti ya Kajiado tumepangana tukiwa na ono kamilifu ya kusema ufugaji wetu, mataon zetu, mambo ya mazingira yetu tunaenda kuipatia kipaumbele katika ono ya kuhakikisha kwamba tumeacha legacy nzuri.
The Tenry Mission, in conjunction with the county government of Embu and other development partners, has conducted a cleanup exercise in all streets and estates of Embu town ahead of the Madaraka Day celebrations. Embu Deputy Governor Kenyo Amogo, who led the exercise, revealed that Embu County was in the process of preparing a bill to be tabled in the county assembly to set aside a day every month for cleanup. Embu Senator Alexander Mundigi noted that Embu town has the capacity to grow and become a city like Nakuru, Kisumu and Mombasa.
Within the second week of assumption of office, tulikuja tukafagia town yetu, tukafanya mobilization, business community na watoto wa shule, people walikuja tukatunga mkono, tukaenda kona zote katika vitongoji zote tukisafisha town yetu. Kwa nini tulifanya hivyo? Tulitaka kuonyesha watu wetu inawezekana hata gavana mwenyewe ambaye ni gavana amechaguliwa achukue kifagio, achukue jembe, achukue panga, aende akate nyasi, ndio mazingira yetu ikiwe safi.
Tukiangalia mambo ya usafi, na si ati tumeanza sasa hivi kwa sababu tuko na tarehe moja tutakuja hapa. Tunafanya hivyo kwa sababu ni njia moja ya kurainisha Embu County, ni njia moja ile ni qualification ya sile itafanya tupate city.
Yote pamoja kwa shirikiana. Hiyo mzuri, wakati wa corona hawezi, lakini imeanza kutoka mwaka huu. Mwaka huu special kwa sababu ni president anakuja. Kwa hivyo sio kawaida mwaka huu. Kwa hivyo sisi tunafurahi sana, endelea, enjoy na kusafisha na maisha yetu enjoy.
The Evangelical Alliance of Kenya is calling for the enactment of a separate law to help regulate churches instead of lumping them together with other entities under the Society Act. Speaking at the Skills for Living Ministries Church in Siaya Town, the Secretary General, Dr. Nelson Makandia, said once the law is in place, religious bodies will be able to address unique issues affecting them instead of the current situation where they have to export to the registrar of societies.
Without regulation, the churches register under Register of Societies, and there's a law that regulates churches. But however, we desire as EAK that we have a separate statute so that then we are able to address issues that are unique to us.
Have also requested the government not to harass all church ministers because of the wrongdoings of individuals that maybe they can reach.
Moving on, a group of visually impaired persons in Laikipia has undergone digital technology training to empower them to access basic computer services on their own. Speaking during a certificate awarding ceremony, Chief Librarian Dorothy Ireri said called on the government to employ more people with disability.
Tungetaka at least hata serikali yetu ya national government iweze kusaidia, ndio ikiwezekana hao watu wapate pahali wanaweza kusomea, pahali wanaweza pengine hata kupata computers zingine, ndio waendelee na kujifunza, ndio waendelee hata kusitumia.
Wamejua kuoperate computer, wamejua kwenda kwa internet kutuma emails, na sana sana wameweza hata kujua kuaccess services za government in e-citizen, mahali wanaweza even file returns on their own, wanaweza kuaccess basically all the services za serikali in the e-citizen.
Kwa mambo ambayo nimejifunza ni haswa hapo kwa internet, kutuma email, kutumia sana sana Gmail. Nimejifunza kuhusu access government services kwa e-citizen.
Hatugeomba serikali wakati kama huu ambapo tuko na watu kama hawa, kama kuna opportunities waweze kupewa hizo opportunities, kusomeshwa, kuletewa zile mashini zao, ili kuhakikisha kwamba watu hawa wamesaidika hata kule kwa community, na pia kujifanyia kazi na mikono yao.
Now, over 3,000 boda riders in Garissa County have been registered in vigilance groups to help in reducing insecurity in the region. The initiative, spearheaded by the police and the National Transport and Safety Authority in collaboration with the boda riders, will strive to streamline the sector and train the operators on road safety.
Speaking after one-day workshop for security officials and the riders organized by KBC Alliance, nominated Member of Parliament Umi Harun called upon national leaders and public institutions to come up with ways to empower the riders.
Watu wa bodaboda tumesema tukae na wao chini, tusikize issue zao ni nini na ni aje tunaweza kusanyika na tusaidiane, because mambo ya usalama is not limited to the security sector only. Si kazi tu ya OCPD, si kazi tu ya OCS, ni kazi ya wewe kama mwananchi, kazi ya wewe kama mfanyabiashara, na sisi kama viongozi. Manake tukiwachia hii issue ikuwe mtu mmoja na handle, haitakuwa na any benefit.
Garissa Township Sub-County Police Commander James Ngetich noted that crime associated with boda riders has decreased since the vigilance initiative started. He has linked the progress to the establishment of good relationship between the security agencies and the riders.
Mpaka sasa tumefikisha 95% kusajili, na hiyo 5% imebaki tunashughulikia, na nafikiri by hii wiki ikiisha tutakuwa tumesajili karibu 100%. So kuna wachache ambaye bado kidogo wanakaa kama hawakubaliani kuingia kwa vikundi, lakini tunawahimiza. Tunatumia machiefs, tunatumia viongozi wale wa bodaboda ambaye tayari wameregister, kuwasia wa vijana waingie kwa vikundi, ndio tuweze kufanya kazi pamoja, tushirikiane na tufanye Garissa iwe ni mahali pazuri pa kuishi na kuwekeza.
Area Bodaboda Chairman Maxwell Otieno promised to continue working with authorities to weed out the few operators who are tainting the image of the sector.
Program tulianza ya kutag hizi bodaboda na kuweka kila stage chairman imetusaidia sana. Imetusaidia ku-identify wale wabaya walikuwa kati yetu, na tunang'ang'ana naye, but so far tunaona 95% imeingia. Bado tu wachache wale bado wako na ukora wajijiunga na sisi, but security imetuahidi watang'ang'ana, tuone vile tutaweza na tunyoroshe hii industry.
Within bodaboda society, yes, sisi tunaweza watambua, but tusaidie kabisa tuwatoe wote, si ndio? Tubaki tu wale.
Communities have been urged to increase their engagement with civil society organizations to spur development at the grassroots. Former Makueni Governor Kibudha Kibwana says it is twice as hard to achieve sustainability if there is no development led from the grassroots. He says that the notion that it is only the government that can come up with solutions to local problems is false.
This is one of the ideas that we have which
can help to turn around our country, many countries on the continent, when in reality, people work with our communities to make sure that there is citizen agency, there is self-reliance.
And the intention with Yetu was to build Kenyan assets, Kenyan capacity, and Kenyan trust in support of Kenyan development. Yetu has gone nationwide, working with 323 Kenyan civil society organizations, enabling 275 million Kenyan shillings to be raised locally for local initiatives.
In other news, about 60,000 people across the country are set to benefit from medical camps courtesy of the M-Pesa Foundation. The foundation has set aside 46 million shillings to fund health information provision of medical equipment and drugs for general health care, screening of select non-communicable diseases, dental care, eye care, and management of diabetes and hypertension. Nicholas Nganga, the M-Pesa Foundation chairman, said that the first camp will be in Lamu County, where the M-Pesa Foundation has invested 1.7 million shillings in drugs and surgical equipment to support the provision of medical services. He further said that the medical camps will be an avenue to ensure better health care outcomes for local communities. At the same time, Safaricom Foundation has begun renovating Kiwayu dispensary in Lamu at a cost of 2 million shillings to further improve access to health services for the community.
Lazima nishukuru Safaricom Foundation na M-Pesa Foundation. Wao walivyoendewa na waziri wetu Dr. Mbarak, mara moja walikubali kupatana na sisi na wametusaidia kwa kiwango kikubwa.
Bila afya bora nchi haiwezi kuendelea. Wananchi wakiwa na afya bora wanaweza endelea na maisha zao za kawaida, kufanya kazi, kutafuta kazi, yani economic empowerment. Kama wananchi hawana afya bora, basi hawezi kuendelea na kazi zao za kawaida, kuendelea na shule. Kwa hivyo afya ni kitu ya maana sana.
Equipment itasaidia sana wagonjwa wetu kuweza kufanyiwa matibabu ya hali ya juu hapa Lamu, bila ya kuenda kuyatafuta matibabu hayo ambayo kawaida ni lazima either waende Mombasa ama Nairobi ama nje ya Kenya.
Well, that report on health matters brings us to a fast break here on Lunchtime News. Don't go too far. We still have more news coming up.
Iwapo unakohoa, unahisi uchungu kwenye kifua, uchovu kila wakati, joto jingi mwilini, unakosa hamu ya kula au kupoteza uzito haraka bila kukusudia, na kutokwa na jasho jingi usiku, waweza kuwa waugua TB.
Sasa wewe ni mtoto mdogo wewe.
Mimi na tata yangu.
Wewe una miaka ngapi?
Mimi? 16. Kuna mahali mimi nishaikosana na wewe ama umesikia ati nimeipa mahali pesa?
You are very romantic and professional.
Sina swali kile kwa bibi yangu.
TB yaweza kuangamiza jamii yako. Usikubali. Matibabu ni bila malipo katika hospitali zote za serikali.
After the dust settled on rigorous campaigns, Kenyans are waiting for elected leaders to deliver on their pledges.
Have you used the hustler fund?
When your children sleep hungry, when you can borrow 500 or 1,000 shillings and they have some food on the table.
So the 500 you're giving me now is my purchasing power has literally been diminished comparing to probably even January or December.
But how have the leaders performed so far?
In terms of the amount of money that is being disbursed, the minimum being 500 shillings, how do you scorecard that?
No, that I'll give it a 2 out of 5.
2 out of 5.
1 out of 5.
I'll still give it 5 out of 5.
Every week, we bring you an honest assessment of the national and county governments.
What is the impact of the Hustlers Fund?
There are people who borrow praying they don't have to pay back. For example, they pray that the owner dies.
The Scorecard. Every Tuesday at 10 p.m. on KBC Channel 1.
드는 것만으로는 증거가 안 돼요.
처벌에 적게. 하나님이 너 때리래.
Welcome back. This is Lunchtime News. Now we cross over to Safari Park, where it is day 2, where the 3rd Kenya International Investment Conference is currently underway, where it is dubbed Unlocking Africa's Gateway, bringing together over 2,000 delegates from government, private sector, development partners and non-state actors, as well as Africa trading blocs, discussing strategies for unlocking Africa's potential in investment and trade. And now we join our reporter Hibak Said to give us a detailed report. Hibak.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Wambiru is still on ground at Safari Park, where we have been following the proceedings of the Kenya International Investment Conference. We have been talking about a lot of sectors, and we've been looking at exhibitions, and most importantly, just a few moments ago, the Cabinet Secretary for Tourism, Penina Malonza, was here talking about a lot of things that are going to be impacting the tourism sector, and most importantly, tourism is always associated with animals. With me, I have a biologist. If you could just tell us, how can Kenya use biology? How can Kenya use its animals to bring in investments into Kenya?
Yeah, thank you very much. Of course, Kenya is one of the top global biodiversity countries, and to put that into perspective, I'm talking about 400 species of mammals, about 1,110 species of birds, 100 species of reptiles, over 100 species of frogs alone, and several Sicilian species that have never been, seen by tourists. And these are some of the species that people can enjoy as they come to this country. In addition, we have endangered species that are specific to Kenya. One of them is the Hirola antelope that is endemic to eastern Kenya, and there are about 400 to 500 of them left. And it's called the four-eyed antelope. It's one of the unique treasures in Kenya that has not been seen by many tourists.
And of course, driving up numbers is one of the things that are being talked about here. You've talked about endangered species, which is something that people don't often speak about. What are some of the things, or what are some of the gaps that are within that particular area that maybe you would like to highlight?
Yes, this, a lot of the tourist circuit in Kenya is limited to specific regions, but it could be opened up to cover other areas like northeastern Kenya and northern counties, and also coastal counties. And with the building of the infrastructure such as the lab set, some of these areas are going to open up, and people are going to see many more products.
And of course, driving up investment is not only in the tourism sector. We are also looking at new innovations and things that haven't been done before that are going to be starting out in Kenya. Remember that Kenya is being looked at as the gateway into the African continent, as a place of investment and a place of connection. Blockchain. What exactly is blockchain, and how is Kenya a leader in this front?
Well, Kenya is known as almost like the Silicon Valley of Africa. If it doesn't happen in Kenya, it's not going to happen anywhere else. So that's why we established Venom Africa right here in Kenya. Blockchain is pretty simple. It's three things. It's a payment system, it's a smart contract, and it's an immutable ledger. And blockchain can transform dramatically the economies by taking the reliance away from external currencies and external treasuries, and enabling intra-African trade to be much more cost-efficient, much more frictionless, and to help economies and to help the unbanked.
which is a very interesting concept. If you could maybe just tell us as we wrap up, how do fintechs come in? Kenya has a lot of fintechs.
Sure, Kenya has a lot of fintechs, and I think that the way to wrap this thing up was just imagine all of the wealth that you have today in Kenya, which is not fintech, it's a plantation, it's a mine, it's different types of property assets, it's carbon credits. All of these valuable assets can be put onto the blockchain and can be tokenized, and this is the future for Kenya, and we are here to try and put that infrastructure in place to help it happen.
Of course, investors are looking towards tokenization to ensure that Kenya taps into places that we thought we would never be able to tap into. As the day progresses, we are seeing advancements being made in various sectors, and we're even looking to see how we can enrich the micro, small and medium enterprises to ensure that we can tap into these things and that we can grow the economy. Back to you in studio, Jackie Wambiru.
Well, thank you so much, Hibak Said from Safari Park, giving us a detailed report of developments underway from the 3rd Kenya International Investment Conference, whose curtain falls Wednesday. Now, we move on to another report where invest in Kenya and benefit from Kenya's export processing zones and the special economic zones. This is the message from Investment Promotion Principal Secretary Abubakar Hassan to investors attending the 3rd Kenya International Investment Conference. Abubakar says the government has rolled out incentives like graduated corporate tax holidays, import duty and VAT sales tax exemptions, withholding taxes exemptions in remittances to non-residents, as well as expedited project approvals. We now join Regina Manyara from Safari Park, the venue of the conference, for more details.
Government has partnered with private sector, Afrexim Bank and the rest, to develop extra processing zones and special economic zones. These zones, they provide incentives such as graduated corporate tax holidays, perpetual import duty and VAT exemptions, capital investment deduction, expedited project approvals, investor support and aftercare through one-stop center, and immigration, custom and operational support, among other incentives. As a country, we also have a special operating framework called SOFA, anchored in law, through which investors making high-value strategic investment that we're going to transform this country to negotiate additional incentives with the government.
I would remiss to talk about opening Africa as a gateway without touching on how this could be a benefit for our small businesses. We must be deliberate to support and integrate SMEs to play increased role on the value chains of the large enterprises that often have an upper hand in accessing export markets. All our countries, 70 to 80% of our businesses are SME.
Plans are underway to conduct a wildlife census in the coming year aimed at establishing the current status of the wildlife sector and emerging challenges in the country. The government says the census will be used to determine the impact of drought on wildlife populations in all affected ecosystems.
Latest data from the African Wildlife Foundation indicates that expanding human settlements, a changing climate that makes resources more scarce, and poaching have contributed to declines in wildlife populations. Giraffe populations in Kenya have fallen about 40% over the last 3 decades. As a result, gaps in the sector have shown the need to collect wildlife mortality data in order to mobilize resources in the affected areas as a way of addressing the situation.
We needed an institute and a roadmap that can actually guide us in terms of the information and the data that we are collecting across the country.
Malonza says the program will also increase awareness on human-wildlife interactions in order to create informative policy. This, she says, will allow industry players better understand population sizes and their distribution, identify threats to animals, and suggest conservation strategies.
A common one that has been around the wildlife and human interactions. We're looking at the wildlife economy, and we're looking at also the genetics of our wildlife.
To this end, stakeholders say studies to destock overpopulated sanctuaries will be established in order to prevent disease spreading.
We've been able to do a biomass assessment to determine the capacity that is required within that reserve, including recommending to management KWS.
The importance of wildlife population dynamics, understanding status and trends is key, and also understanding the habitat and the dynamics and ecological processes that determine whether our populations are growing or not.
Ndutamo Kami for Lunchtime News.
Africa has been urged to ensure prudent use of its massive natural resource base to drive the continent's economic development agenda. Senior advisor at Japan International Cooperation Agency, Yoshizawa Kei, said that despite Japan's lack of natural resources, the country has leveraged its human resource to grow the economy.
The World Bank indicates that the age dependency ratio of sub-Saharan Africa in 2021 was 83%, with Kenya's coming in slightly lower at 70%. JICA says Africa should take advantage of its high youthful population to grow the economy.
I think now the population of Africa is an opportunity, or it's a potential for Africa's future.
Kei says during Japan's formative years, the labor-intensive industries absorbed majority of the population, with the population also providing a ready market for the goods and services.
The population is increasing, but also the working age populations, they are more than the dependent populations. That means the children and the elderly people.
He further attributes sustainable development to education and health. Kei says Japan's development in transport infrastructure has further enabled the East Asian country to maintain its growth trajectory.
The Japanese government made a plan, very long-term infrastructure development plan to build railway or highway, and power stations, dams, etc. And also, importantly, it was achieved.
It is a concept that, if properly utilized by African countries, the growing and largely young population will become an opportunity and not a challenge. Judith Akolo, The Lunchtime News.
All engineers in Kenya will now be required to log in and register the projects they're handling in order to create a transparent and accountable system for tracking and monitoring engineering projects. Engineers Board of Kenya says the portal will also serve as a centralized platform where engineers can conveniently register their documentation, a move that will also weed out quirks in the sector. Trevor Ngendo reports.
Low registration rate, consumption and delivery are some of the challenges that have rocked the engineering profession. Principal Secretary of the State Department for Roads, Engineer Joseph Mbugwa, says through the improvement of infrastructures, engineers play a pivotal role in reducing trade barriers, improving market access and attracting domestic and foreign investments to promote economic activities across the country.
The ministry is implementing reforms to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of the transport sector. This includes the modernization of regulatory framework, promoting competition and streamlining administrative processes to reduce bureaucratic hurdles and enhance service delivery.
Key areas of discussion during the upcoming Engineering Partnerships Convention would include technological advancements and their impact on engineering standards and practices to help in the development of appropriate legislation and policies. Engineers Board of Kenya says an online portal will be launched where professionals in the sector can provide crucial details and documentations to enhance efficiency in project management to ensure standards and regulations are adhered to.
The board has developed the Engineers Project Registration Portal, where all engineers are expected to log in to the portal and register the projects that they are handling. This will enhance efficiency and effective monitoring and verification of the profession engineering services and works. The project will be launched during the convention. The engineers registration portal is expected to minimize cases of infrastructure collapses.
The national broadcaster Kenya Broadcasting Corporation is the official media partner, a collaboration that seeks to amplify the impact of their messages, promote dialogue and inspire a wider audience to actively participate in Kenya's economic transformation through engineering in the 3-day convention that will happen in Naivasha from next month. The Ministry of Roads and Transport has held the Engineering Partnerships Convention as a flagship activity in a bid to demonstrate the government's commitment to fostering growth through engineering. Trevor Ngendo for Lunchtime News, Nairobi.
Online Bank Branch International says it leverages artificial intelligence technology to minimize credit risk, a practice that has strengthened its credit risk management, ensuring reliable and responsible lending practices. The lender says AI technology is the game changer in the banking landscape to implement a risk-based lending model to meet the credit needs of all customers.
You don't have to just do up to 150,000 shillings because that was the ceiling we were providing. Now we've doubled that amount. We did that last year. We're giving up to 300,000 Kenya shillings unsecured, and we possibly are going to increase that. And why? Because of the use of our artificial intelligence, we're able to predict risk to a very accurate level. So that's one of the features that we're very excited about. And because our users, when we looked at the data that we have, 63% of our users use the cash that we give them to pay for uses which are within, let's say, the small businesses.
What you need to do is give them an incentive to just put a few shillings aside, maybe every day or every week, and don't allow them to access that, right? So all of us in our moments of prudence and our moments of thinking long term, we want to save, but then in the day-to-day reality, something happens and you don't save. But if you can provide a feature, we call it target savings, which literally locks the shillings in a vault for 90 days, 180 days, 365 days, people really prefer that. So we ran a test, which is very interesting. We offered one product, which is fully liquid. You can take it out every day. We offer another product, which locks it. The one that locks was more popular.
Audible? Not, yeah, Audible is.
Now, South Africa's telecommunication giants have faced the perfect storm with harsher load shedding, rising spending to soften its impact, and slow economic growth over the past year. These factors have chased some investors away, with share prices in South Africa's telecom sector underperforming. Here are more details on that story and other African business news by Pauline Kihali.
The 7-member Telecommunications Index, which features the likes of MultiChoice, Huge Group and Telemaster, has seen losses of 30%. While some are facing very specific challenges, none could be spared from the malefic conditions that have manifested in the country. Vodacom and MTN in particular, and more so Vodacom, have been able to invest more in network resiliency to mitigate the impact of load shedding on connectivity. As South Africa's energy crisis worsened, compromising network availability during power outages, mobile operators have been forced to provide for the additional cost of investing in backup power at their network sites to keep customers connected. Meanwhile, experts in Rwanda say that the country has the potential to progress in robotics in diverse sectors such as agriculture, entertainment, electronics manufacturing, construction, metal and machinery. According to Christine Niiza Muyitira, an IT expert and telecommunication engineer, there is a possibility of progress in robotics in Rwanda that will revolutionize industry practices. Players in the ICT sector have called for joint efforts to scale up the use of robots in schools across the country so as to expose children to technologies so that they can build their own inventions and innovations early in their lives. Finally, Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange rose by 23% thanks to 4.7 billion pre-arranged deal by foreign investors at the Tanzania Breweries Limited counters. The deal involved 790,000 shares at 6,000 per share, a discounted price as TBL market price stood at 10,900 shillings per share. According to Zan Securities Chief Executive Officer Rafael Masumbuko, sectors such as banking, finance and investments continue to display robustness and present potential investment prospects. Pauline Kihali for Lunchtime News.